Good morning. Welcome to Ag Talk and Raw, where I talk raw about agriculture and other things that are on my mind. Yes, that is my opening. I usually do say something like that, probably the same thing for the last several years. But anyway, let's just talk about ag chemical prices and the gouging that is going on right now and why it's happening to us. I don't know why it's happening to us. As farmers, you would think that there would be a priority taken to see that the agricultural chemicals that we have, that we need, fertilizers, lime. Yes, lime is a chemical. It's calcium. Fertilizers, lime, herbicides, burn downs, and such, contact herbicides, residual herbicides, and insecticides and fungicides, which insecticides and fungicides are really something that you don't want to have to use. If you have to use insecticides, your plants aren't healthy enough, unless you have a major infestation of, say, Japanese beetles and or grasshoppers, or as they call them in other parts of the world, locusts. But the other ones, like mites, spider mites, and whitefly, and all these other things, they can be avoided if you use proper farming practices. You're probably going to be like, oh, fuck you, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, I do actually know what I'm talking about. It's just like a human being. And while we're on that subject, why don't we talk a little bit about the China virus? Okay, so the China virus, who's it killing? China virus is killing old people, sickly people, and people that have any kind of compromise to their immune system. So if you were sick already with something, you could easily succumb to the symptoms of COVID-19. And why am I saying that? Because your crops are exactly the same way. So, I know there's a lot of people that think I've fallen off the deep end and I'm going organic, which I am not going organic. I will be using a lot more organics to bring my soil back to life. There's one thing that I noticed bigly. I'll use that word just because it pisses off the lefties. The one thing that I noticed bigly is whenever I kill a stand of hay that I've had, grass, for any amount of time over 5 years, it seems that the top 6 inches of that soil is very dark, full of organics, carbon, and all the other goodies that you need to make the crop that you're growing, the row crop that you're growing, grow very well, extraordinarily well. Like, holy shit, why does this field do so well? It's like when you find a fallow field that somebody's family member died and it didn't get farmed for 4 or 5 years. You go out and you brush hog the mess off of it, and you either no-till a crop into it, or you kill it off, work it up a bit with a disc or a chisel plow and disc, and then you put your crop in there, or you even no-till it. And for some reason, that field that hasn't been farmed for so long seems to pull a bumper crop, even if it's a weird year, like whether it's dry or too wet. It's just kind of like, what is it about this soil that has made this crop grow so good? And I know maybe out in the Midwest you don't get that so much unless you came into a CRP field or something like that, and you're like, wow, what the heck is going on with this thing? Well, it hasn't been messed with by human hands in a while. As far as hay is concerned, for the most part, grass hay, we're not putting insecticide or fungicide on grass hay fields, okay? So if you go to the fertilizer plants and you say, hey, what's it take to make my corn grow that much, grow way better? The first thing you're going to say is, well, you're going to have to do a mid-season fungicide application or something else. So this all can be averted or diverted or stopped with good soil health. Good soil health doesn't mean you're just dumping the latest and greatest fertilizer blend onto your soil. It doesn't mean that you're going to, pulverize your soil into a flat powder and it looks good to plant through like they do in Europe. They really work the piss out of their soil. We work to piss out our soils too, here on the East Coast. and elsewhere in the country, unless you're doing no-till or minimum till. I will be going into, I really want to leave the chisel plow behind unless I absolutely have to use it. The ripper is a step that will be taken to break up that lower compaction, that tire compaction from way down. You see a bug there. That way down deep compaction, that 10-inch to 12-inch range where these heavy tractors and balers have been rolling across these fields for the last 5 to 23 years. And there are some fields that I've been farming for 23 years on hay only, and it's like, wow, that's a lot of years with hay. So when you do that, you break up that compaction that actually allows oxygenation, aeration of the soil. It allows more penetration of water or percolation of water to go down. It also makes it easier for roots to go down deep to get to that water. Breaks up that compaction layer for worms to go through it and organics to go deep. You really do want that to take place in your soil, in the profile. Now, I had a lot of questions on my ripper, and are you going to do that every year? No, I'm not going to do that every year. There's no point in doing it every year. The whole plan with the ripper is to get it broke up deep, all right? Get a lot of organic onto the soil to promote microbial and worm activity. Microbial, beneficial fungal, and worm activity. So that's the whole point there. So if my soil is sick, like there's no microbial, very little microbial, worst thing you can use for microbial activity is a nitrogen stabilizer that is a microbicide, like Agritane and Nutrisphere. Those are both microbicides, and what they do is they kill off the microbes in the soil that break down that nitrogen and allow it to release. Allow the nitrogen to release. So, move freely in the soil. So you kill off your microbes at the top 4 to 6 inches of your soil to prevent your nitrogen from going off into the atmosphere, which I was guilty of it. I did it and couldn't understand why the hell, and I mean really, why in the hell is my crop not doing as well as it used to? Like half a ton to the acre off. You don't understand it. It's like, well, wait a minute, I did everything I was supposed to do. I conserved my nitrogen. Yeah, the field is green, but it's just not doing very well. Well, microbial activity in the soil also beneficial funguses that are in your soil, and worms feed on organic matter that are broke down by the microbial activity and the beneficial funguses and all these other things. So it's like a symbiotic circle. You've got those things that you really need in the soil, and when you kill them off to save one, you're actually damaging the 3 other things that you really need that are far more important than that nitrogen that could go off into the air. You're costing yourself. There are some products that you can use that will stabilize nitrogen. I'm not sure about the microbial activity of bees, what it does to it. I haven't really researched it too much, but we do need to conserve nitrogen if we can, and copper sulfate is one of those things. If you want to conserve urea, nitrogen, or even your agritane or God damn it, why am I saying agritane? I'm saying anyways, your liquid fertilizers, like 32%, 30%, 28%, 26%. Some people just use those. They buy water. If you're buying anything under 32% in your liquid nitrogen, it is urea, sulfur uran, or whatever. If you use those, you can use sulfur uran, which is sulfur, liquid sulfur that comes in from battery plants into your urea, your nitan. That's what I'm trying to say. Nitan fertilizers. Sulfur will bind nitrogen. Okay, it does bind nitrogen, and we are all sulfur deficient. When you pull your soil tests, I have some soil tests here from a farm that came from Rutgers. I'm not pleased with Rutgers soil testing. It's not detailed enough for me for the microbes and the micronutrients, and it's just not detailed enough for me. So I will not be using them. I generally take mine up to FS Growmark and have them do it. It's $13 a sample, and they'll do that, and it's very in detail. It goes down copper, sulfur, manganese, zinc, any boron, and it'll even say cadmium, which is things you don't want in your soil. Cadmium is a bad one. Chromium is another one that's not good. But you want to know everything that's in that soil, so you know where you're at. Calcium levels, soluble calcium levels. There is calcium levels that can be quite high. So anyways, if you know what's in your soil and you know what you can address within your soil, the fungus and those badass insects or mites, spider mites, white flies and things like that, they can become mute subjects if your soil is in good health. A lot of people don't understand that. I mean, there's a lot of dead soil in this country due to over-tillage. Yes, over-tillage, I said it. Over-tillage and just lack of understanding as to what is beneath your feet and what you're doing to what is beneath your feet, all trying to chase that highest yield possible. I'm guilty of it. I'll say I'm guilty of it, and then you become a little more educated as to, like, why am I putting all this fertilizer down to gain 3 or 4 bushels? Why am I doing that? Is this the law of diminishing return? And especially in a year like we're going to have coming up in 22, we're not going to have the money that everybody thinks that we have, because we're going to be paying double the cost for fertilizers unless you've already prepaid, and even that is not a guarantee that they're not going to come in and say, hey, here's your fertilizer for $380 a ton that costs everybody else $900 or $1,100 a ton. It's just not going to happen. $900 to $1,200, $1,300. I've even heard $1,300 a ton for a blend of fertilizer. So just prepare yourselves. Herbicides, if you can get them. I remember the tote of Roundup or glyphosate that I have, the remainder of what I have left, that tote cost me $8.25 a gallon. I just got quoted $52 a gallon for that same shit. $52 a gallon, and they're claiming there was a glyphosate facility down in Louisiana that hurricane came up through this past summer, fall, and destroyed it, and they haven't been able to produce glyphosate, which is an absolute, maybe not an absolute lie, but a partial lie. We get a lot of our agricultural chemicals from China. It's a shame that we have to rely on a communist country for our agricultural chemicals. And, if you think that China is our friend, China is not our friend. Communism is not our friend. I'm almost 50 years old, right? In the 70s and 80s, we were still talking about communism. In the 50s and 60s, they were talking about nuclear fallout. I don't ever remember having to stick my head, get beneath our desks, sit with our legs in front of us, hold onto our legs, and put our heads between our knees. I don't remember that, as if that's going to stop any nuclear disaster from killing you. That's what they did. They used to put kids in the hallway and line them up and down the hallways in schools and do that. Put your head between your knees and like this, and just brace yourself for the concussion of the nuclear blast. It's just going to turn you to dust against a wall. If you don't know that that's what happens in a nuclear blast, just go to Japan and take a look. They'll show you all about what a nuclear blast can do. Yeah, that was interesting. I was there. Really a trip that every American needs to take, to be honest with you. Every ignorant American. So anyway, with that being said, we're just getting off the beaten path. So China is not going to be producing our agricultural chemicals because they get to have the Olympics of Beijing, China. You know, and I think the Olympic Committee should have pulled the plug when COVID-19 in December of 2019 hit the world. Even though COVID-19 is 99.7% survivable, and it is something that if you're healthy, you don't have any underlying problems, you are pretty much going to survive it pretty easily. If you're not healthy, like morbidly obese, diabetic, heart conditions, it will attack you there. And that's what happens. We don't even need to go there. We all know that this is some fucked up way for the government to poison us with their stupid vaccines that aren't vaccines, and who knows? I am not taking that. You can take it if you want, and you can be all happy about it if you want. But you know what? 5, 6, 8, 10 years down the road, if you've got problems because of that vaccine, I can just hear the commercials. You know, how about all these commercials that come on? If you were a victim of the COVID-19 vaccine, you should call this number. Even though you can't sue the company that produces a vaccine, thanks to Bill Clinton. But we're done with that. Anyways, back to soil health. So fungicides, if you feel the need to put fungicide on your corn or soybean crop because some chemical company told you, or a commercial fertilizer company, or whatever told you to, take a good long hard look at your soil before you do that, because fungicides kill all fungus, all of it, beneficial and non-beneficial. And just like your stomach, your gut, if you take antibiotics, it kills the bacteria within your stomach, and you need to reintroduce your stomach, the bacteria, into your stomach using lactobacillus or some form of bacteria that you need to reintroduce into your stomach, because it kills all of the bacteria, and the bad bacteria is the stronger of the two types of bacteria, good and bad. So if you ever had, like, say, Lyme disease, like I had, and you took these medications, these antibiotics for a long period of time, and you all of a sudden come up with heartburn and other things like that, that means your gut is not in good health, and you need to add good bacteria. And it's not a one-shot deal either. It is a very long process to get your stomach back into health. If you don't have good stomach health, you become obese. You have all kinds of other physical problems with inflammation in your joints and other things like that. And diabetes, all sorts of health problems with bacteria. So your body is very much like the soil beneath your feet. If it's not healthy, nothing that is around it or grows from it can be healthy. So your plants, if they've got a healthy base down deep where they're drawing their nutrients and pulling their water and just that life cycle that it needs to take to produce a crop that keeps you in business, if it's not healthy, you're not going to be healthy. Nothing is going to be healthy. You won't be able to pay your bills. You won't be able to pay anything because your crop is subpar. And you have put a lot of investment into that crop, and to get little back out of it because you have hurt your soil's health. Now, not everybody has access to the things that I have access to here on the East Coast. That's just a flat out fact. There are some people out here on the interweb that will say that I am full of shit and I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, you know what? I will agree to you that I don't know everything that I'm talking about, but I'm pretty good idea. I know more about what I'm talking about than a lot of people that are farming. And here's another thing that's out there that people will say, yeah, well, doing what you're saying is a good idea, but you know what? I just don't have time for that. Or, you know what? It doesn't matter if my soil's dead because I can make it go. I can make that crop grow with more fertilizer or a proper balance of fertilizers. So, okay, you're probably right for a while. But you ever hear of that dog running to the end of its chain, metaphor? Like, you know what? You're like a dog running to the end of your chain. You know what happens when you get to the end of that chain? When that dog gets to the end of the chain at full bore, it breaks its neck. That's a fact. It breaks its neck. This coming year on my row crop operation, I am going to cut my fertilizer costs down probably less than half of what they were by using simple things that I've learned on the internet and throughout my life. And I think that a lot of people really should pay attention to their soil that's down deep. Now, I spent a lot of money on a fertilizer and litter spreader, lime and litter spreader, I should say, the lime spreader, and I'm hauling a lot of ag lime home. I need somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 tons. I could probably go with 2,000 tons and still be okay. I'm going to spread today. You're going to get some better footage of that, and hopefully you enjoy that footage, because you know what? It's a pain in the ass to do it, get the proper footage, and, but okay, so what does lime do for you? There's two types of calcium. Well, there's actually two or three. There's many different types of calcium, but there's two types of calcium that you really want. You want the type of calcium like high calcium, high magnesium, high manganese limes, and if you get any of these types of limes, please do your soil tests first. There's another type of calcium that will not raise your pH, and I did soil testing on, well, actually, this soil test here says that I have high calcium levels, right? Calcium equals higher pH, right? Wrong. Okay, so why is my calcium level high, but my pH is deplorable? I mean, we're looking, I'll take a look here. This one here, pH is 9.3 or 5.93. And the next sample, this was done by a new property owner, and he said, "Hey, this is what I need you to do in order for you to farm my fields." I'm like, "Oh, no problem, because it'll make me healthier." 5.54 on that one. There's three tests here. And this is a Rutgers test, and I'm just, yeah. Yeah, and this final one is going to be probably the worst one, 5.58. So it's 5.5. What's ideal for pH? Ideal for pH is somewhere between 6.5 and 6.8. They don't want you to go to neutral at 7, even though neutral at 7 is where everything seems to work the best on our soil. Maybe not on your soil, but on our soils, different soils that we have and what we've used. You get 7, 7, 1, and your herbicides work super good. You don't want them to work too good. You can actually reduce your rate. So if it says a quart to a quart and a half to the acre of a product, err on the side of a quart. Not a quart and a half, but a quart. Because that neutral pH allows that herbicide to work and flow through the soil easier because of the calcium levels that are there. Now, usable calcium or pH rising calcium would be high calcium lime, high manganese, high magnesium limes, that you put on your soil. But there is also a type of calcium that can be high levels in your soil but not lower the pH, and that would be your gypsum. Gypsum does not raise the pH in your soil. Gypsum is the type of calcium that I love it. I love it because your pHs can be a little lower, but your soil, your micronutrients that are held up in the soil because of that low pH, because the lower your pH, the more fertilizer you're going to have to put on to get the same result. Again, that dog running to the end of its chain. So if you have a pH that's like, I don't know, 6.2, and you're like, they're going to charge me, X number of millions of dollars to put lime on, or I don't know if I'm going to be able to. Afford to put lime on a property that I may lose in the next couple of years. I say put it on anyway. But if you have high calcium levels and it's, your plant seems to be doing pretty good and your pH is low, just put on regular high calcium or high magnesium or high manganese lime. But if your pH is good, and you know this by pulling tissue samples, you have to pull tissue samples. If you pull just a soil test and then you don't go and pull a tissue sample, you really don't know what's going on in your field either. Because you could pull that soil test and say, hey, look, all this stuff is here. I should be good, right? Should be good. I should be good. So you put your crop out there and you should be good. You go, you spray the herbicide down, and for some reason it just doesn't seem to work that well. It's like, man, my pH is a little bit low, but it doesn't seem to be working as well as I'd like it to. Residuals, contact herbicides work no matter what. Whether it's Liberty or Roundup, it's going to burn that sucker down if you put the right amount on. Calcium really doesn't matter too much for that. The rain, dew, moisture, the drier it is, the faster it works. You ever notice that? The warmer it is, the faster it works. That sort of thing. So you get through there and your crop just doesn't look quite as nice as it should, or as nice as you'd like it to. So pull some tissue samples off of whatever plant it is and send them in. See what's going on, because just because it's in the dirt doesn't mean it's getting up into your plant. And that's the whole goal, is to get that plant to pull as much nutrient out of the soil as possible to make it healthy, so you don't have to worry about those nuisance insects and those non-beneficial funguses that can really hurt your crop. I hear about white mold in soybeans. White mold in soybeans. I never had white mold in our soybeans, and we plant on 7.5-inch rows. You go out west and they're like, oh my God, you can't do that. 7.5-inch rows. You got to have 30-inch rows or 20-inch rows, 15-inch rows at a minimum. If you go any narrower than that, you're going to get white mold. Well, I could almost guarantee that at some point there was heavy fungicide use, or your soil is in peril. It doesn't have everything in it that it needs. Now, there's agronomists out there that can help you to achieve the higher yields through soil health with less inputs. I'm sure there's a few. And there are some things that you can do that will kill those bugs that isn't an insecticide per se, and it will actually prevent those non-beneficial funguses from growing. It's cheap, it's readily available, and it just I'm not going to let that secret out unless you email me, and then you'll probably post it on your video or whatever and say, hey, One Lonely Farmer told me what it is. And I told everybody that asked me, and it does work. It definitely does. It's a micronutrient. It is very good for your soil. Very, very good for the microbial, beneficial fungus, and worm activity in your soil. Maybe some of you are watching this are like, well, what the hell does worm activity have to do with my crop and how well it works? Well, you have to have that symbiotic circle. If you ever watched the Star Wars movies that were released, I think in the early 2000s, that symbiotic circle through the Jedi, the Force, that is microbial, beneficial bacteria, and worm activity. So, beneficial funguses attach itself to rhizobum bacteria, and beneficial funguses work together with soybeans and corn. The corn doesn't need rhizobum, but there are beneficial funguses that corn does need. I don't know the names of them. I don't have a paper in front of me, but the microbial activity works to break down the organics in your soil. So you take those organics in your soil and you're breaking them down. What happens there? That becomes food for the earthworms. Okay, so your earthworms, which they're pretty tough. They can tolerate herbicide. They can tolerate nitrogen and things like that. They just can't tolerate a dead soil. They can't tolerate no microbial activity, because no microbial activity turns into no food for the worms, and then the worms die. Same thing with the funguses. So the funguses feed the microbes feed the worms bore holes down through the hard pan and allow water to filter down through, turning hard compact soil into an aggregate where becomes then a sponge that brings moisture up and drops moisture down, and your roots can easily pass down through the wormholes and into the water source that is as deep as your soil is. Some corn roots can go as deep as 15 feet, believe it or not, if they have a free range down. Soybeans, I've only ever seen soybeans go down about a foot. I've heard soybeans going down 2 feet. We don't have 2 foot deep soil here. Not without rocks in between it. Shale, we have a lot of shale. So there's a lot of that goes on down deep. Lime is very important. Very, 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 very important. Calcium is very important. pH is very important. Fertilizers that are bound up in clay particles are released by calcium. Calcium in the soil, the proper type of calcium. If you have a good pH, but your nutrients are locked up in the clay because you've got the wrong type of calcium, you're going to need to add gypsum. Gypsum will release nutrients faster than high calcium lime. USA gypsum is only right out here in Pennsylvania, and you can get it pretty easily. It's not expensive. It's rarely cheap, and you don't need to put on tons to the acre, just a couple of 100 pounds. And you do that over the course of 4 or 5 years, and you will see major benefits to your crops. Okay. Deer we can't talk about because we can't kill deer with any kind of a chemical. It's illegal. Plant health is very important because in defending yourself against deer, because as for soybeans, they need to grow and grow and grow. The one thing that I noticed in our soils when I was growing no-till soybeans, and everybody was like, no-till, no-till, no-till. You got to go no-till. If you don't go no-till, well, no-till farming is good. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It does work in this area, but not as good as it does in other areas. Soybeans are kind of funny for us. So a soybean plant, it gets up maybe 4, 5, 6 inches tall here after no-till, and it seems to stall. It always seemed to stall. It's like, God, these beans, they came up pretty good and then they stalled out. Well, that's that compaction or sidewall smear from your no-till drill when you're jamming it in the ground too wet. And there's no closing wheel with spikes that's good enough to actually break that sidewall smear. It only, on a no-till drill, it's one side. On a John Deere anyway, it's one side. It'll crumble one side, and then you get the roots. They'll come down and go to the right or to the left, depending on which direction you're looking at them. That sidewall smear and that compaction layer actually does. It hurts that soybean plant. So a lot of guys will say, well, I can get in real early with a no-till. And you can. You really can, but you're hurting yourself. The soil in my area, the soil has to be correct. If that soil is not correct, you're kidding yourself and thinking you're going to get a good yield. So when I was running no-till corn, it worked okay. It was all right. But you really, really had to wait until that soil, because we had V-closers, they pinch from the top, and I saw something the other day, and I thought that was really cool. It's like a little plowshare, and it folds fresh, uncompacted dirt right over the top of that soil. And I thought, wow, that's kind of cool, preventing that sidewall smear, and then the closing wheels come over the top. But, that's something interesting that I don't know that I would even bother to try it in our soils because we have too many stones. But yeah, that sort of thing is kind of cool. But yeah, there's always something new coming into agriculture. Just wade through the bullshit and find what works best for you, I guess is what I could say. So anyways, with those soybeans, with that lull, no-till farming for me just seemed like it was a step backwards in time. Overworking the soil. My grandmother, I worked with my grandmother for many years till she was 77, and she worked in the fields. Well, she would run a tractor over a field until it was talcum powder, and then if we got any kind of rain and then it dried out, hot, dry, it would form a crust on top of that soil that soybeans couldn't get through because it would just compact like concrete, i.e. not enough calcium. Calcium keeps soil loose. Organic matter keeps soil loose. If you plant through a field of hay that you killed and worked down, and you've got all this organic root mass there, and you're like, wow, this corn came up super even, and it looked really good, even though there's a bunch of clods and stuff. It's the organic matter kept that soil nice and loose in this area. So yeah, that's one of those things that you have to look at. But I guess I've been talking for a long time about soil health because I'm excited about it. I really do want to do the best I can with my soil. I was planning on doing somewhere around 1,000 to 1,500 acres of corn and soybeans, if not just 900 acres of corn, and to hell with the soybeans. You know, I might just keep it into hay. I'm not sure, but then I thought about it. I was like, you know what? If I make the jump from that 320 acres of corn to 1,000 to 1,500 acres, am I going to be able to manage all of that ground the way I could manage my 300 acres and keep it all on the profitable end of it instead of getting sloppy with it because I'm in a hurry to get it done? That was one of those things that I was thinking about it's been recently in the last week. Like, you know, should I really make that jump to 1,500 acres and then go out and buy a bigger combine or another combine and add a bin and all this stuff? And I thought, you know what, I'm going to make an order for 600 acres of corn. I can double my corn acres pretty easily and then add 150 acres of soybeans on top of that. So I got 600 of corn, 750 acres of row crops. I think I can manage those acres pretty easy without sacrificing the overall yield if I can get enough lime home and my compost home. If I can get enough of that done home to do that 750 acres, then if there's time, I will continue to keep bringing it home and I will add acres accordingly. So that's just what I was thinking. Instead of saying, that's it, I'm killing 1,500 acres of stuff and I'm going to plant 1,000 acres of corn or 900 acres of corn or 700 acres of corn. The rest are going into soybeans, and I'm going to build a new bin, and I'm going to raise the bin that I've got, and I'm going to move my grain dryer and turn the white tank into a wet bin, which needs to happen anyway. And that's what I'm going to do. That's exactly what I'm going to do, and that's it. And you know, I thought about it. It's like, you know what? I could kill all this ground and then realize that I bit off more than I can chew to do everything that I need to do to make that crop profitable, and I don't go broke in the process. Because there's all this wonderful thing that we're doing to make the soil healthier and the plant can withstand drought better, but there's this one thing that I have zero control over, and that is the weather. No control over the weather. I could get 900 acres of corn in the ground. I could get the 600 acres of soybeans in the ground, and they could be growing really good. And then somebody shuts the water off. Uh-oh, I'm going bankrupt now. You know, that can happen. Or the water just turns on, and the things suffer because of water, because we really don't have a deep soil. We're only down, you can go down about 10 inches before you start hitting shale. You go any deeper and you're going to start ripping into shale. Trust me, I know. The ripper was bought for that reason, to actually bust down into that shale layer, because roots can go down into the shale and pull stuff out, water out. That kind of hangs out down there, and you know, so those are the things that I've been planning for and doing, but I can't rip 1,500 acres. There's just no way. There's no way I can rip 1,500 acres, and you know, with all those shear bolts that I was breaking, I'm like, fuck, there's a lot of shear bolts to break. But I will be going to the areas that I know are compacted or bad, and I will be ripping those areas, because that's just how it'll have to be. The other, and that is one thing that I did notice. It's not all compacted throughout the whole entire field. It's just high traffic areas, certain areas within the field where like the stack wagon had ran consistently. And I know where those are, so I'm going to go hit those when I do decide to kill these things. But I would still enjoy ripping clear down to the hard pan. And there are some farms that I don't have rocks on that is deep soil. It's deep clay soil, and I know where they are as well. I did get a phone call from a guy yesterday, and he says, "Hey, I've got a 5-shank Unverferth or Unverferth ripper that's got spring reset. If you want to buy it, you can, and that'll just go right over the rocks and then pop back in, and you'll be in good shape." So I'm considering that. I'll take the Brilliant that I bought and run that in the deep soil that doesn't have all the stones in it, and then I take the other one and put it into soil that is more stony, and we'll see where we go from there. So yeah, we just got a lot of plans and a lot of things we want to do, and it just has to be done within a certain fashion. So I'm going to tell everybody that 750 acres is my goal this year until I get to about March, April. March, April, I'll know if I've got enough inputs to plant everything that I want to plant. No matter what, I'm planting 600 acres of corn. Now, I get 600 acres of corn in. That's double what I did this year, okay? Which, no big deal. It's no big deal. Double what I did this year. And soybeans, on the other hand, take less inputs than what corn does. It does. I can use Roundup or Liberty on those beans, whatever chemical seems to be cheaper, and I probably will do that. I do have to definitely get on to the Liberty herbicide program and see how that goes, because the seed that I do purchase is double stacked in that aspect. It'll take either one, whether it's glyphosate or sulfosate. I believe that's the other chemical Liberty is, and that's something to look into. If you guys are on the Roundup kick and there's another option, it's called Ignite or Liberty. You can use that in place of Roundup. It generally costs double the money, but I don't know if it's making the jump that Roundup has done. So I really have to take a good long hard look at that. So Roundup Ready or Liberty, double stack Liberty soybeans, instead of having to put 5 to 7 tons of compost onto a farm to get the amount of nutrition that I need for corn, I can put 1 to 2 tons to the acre for soybeans and do better. That's just it. Instead of putting all that input in for corn, I can just say, hey, you know what? This is my limit. Time out, buddy. I'm only doing 600 acres of corn, and then I can just stack beans up to that 1,500. So I may have more bean ground than I do soybean ground. Who knows? Who knows? I know that I'm going to do the best that I can do, and I'm going to show it on One Lonely Farmer channel. And with that 43 minutes, I've been yakking about soil health and insecticides and fungicides and other things like that. But before I'm done, what I really, truly would like to do at home here on this farm is kill that grass, work it down with a disc. If the compaction layer isn't too deep, rip it where I have to, just work it down with a disc or a high-speed disc. Vertical tillage and high-speed discs are different. That's one thing I've learned over the last month and a half or so that I've been researching these. Vertical tillage is basically straight line wavy coulters that size residue and slightly work the soil. If you don't get enough of the soil, and that allows it to dry out faster, and it also allows the a slight incorporation of those corn stalks, soybean residue, and the compost that I would be putting on. If I disc it, that is going to harm my worm activity a little bit because they got to start over, but it will have that organic matter in that 6 to 8 inch range where I want it. 4 to 6 inches is where I really want it. It'll do that, and the worms can recover and take over and go back to work. And by midsummer, hopefully, the things that I have done have promoted that worm growth to the point where they all fully recover. And then next year, I get my high-speed disc or vertical tillage machine. So I'm thinking that I'm going to get the coulters, the wavy coulters from Red E, and put on my chisel plow. Take the twist shovels off, mount this to my chisel plow, these things to my chisel plow, and run over that stuff with that, which will, in the spring, after I put my compost on, and that will allow, in the next rainstorm, the tea to go down into those slots and the organic material that's on top to be slightly incorporated right in the root zone where it needs to be. But I'm not 100% sure. I'm still really on the fence. I really would like a vertical tillage machine that will work the soil 2 to 3 inches and have a nice seed bed with the rolling baskets and everything else. Yes, that's all the farther I want to work at, 2 to 3 inches. The worms can recover from that. The organic material will be there when they're ready, and they will eat it. And 25 worms per cubic foot will add 200 pounds of usable nutrients to those plants. If you don't have those worms working for you, you have to add the fertilizers to it to make up the difference. But 25 worms per cubic foot, which is a shit ton of worms. There's some organic farms that can achieve that. I don't think that I'll achieve that. I'm looking at probably half of that. So if I can convert 100 pounds of usable nutrient to my plants per acre, on top of what the roots can take in from the microbial activity there, I think my fertilizer problems will be solved. I may not be pushing 200 bushel to the acre this coming year, but my fertilizer bill will be 1/4 of what it was last year. And that's my whole goal. Get that fertilizer bill down to a manageable position where my profit margin is expanded by double, three times. Fertilizer, herbicide are still going to be in the mix. Nitrogen only, compost for the other nutrients. There's a complete blend there with the different things that are in that, and get it in the right spot and make sure that I'm not using a fungicide or a microbicide that is from a chemical company. The microbicides are death to your soils, but I am going to be putting down that product that promotes microbial and fungal activity and will also in turn increase the worm activity. One worm turns into 6 worms in the course of a summer. So if you got 1 worm, you've got 6 worms, and then they split again. It's a smaller number that they split as they split. So by the end of the summer, that 1 worm could technically be somewhere around 15 worms by the time that's done. Hopefully. And yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes over the course of the summer, and you guys can watch my my corn either thrive or die. Thrive or die. Anyways, thanks for watching.